everyone. Welcome to episode 320 of...
320?
I thought we said 319 last... We said 319, but it was not 319.
I'm just excited that it's...
But it is 320.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Because I said
320 episodes. We're getting closer to that 365 number.
I know, and that is actually, if you add in our bonus episodes, we're almost 340, I think, total.
Wow.
65 countries, about 35,000 listens, and so we're proud of our little podcast. And today we have a super special guest. I have just met him 15 minutes ago, maybe, but you all will probably know him. It is Dan Merchant, who is, from what I've heard, a fantastic filmmaker. And that's what, I'm going to have a little moment of transparency here. We are in the middle of past our summer series, but it's still summer here. Got on the big screen, and these are Ken's blockbusters. And this week it was...
Lord Save Us from Your Followers.
Tonight.
Yep.
And I was not here, even though I wanted to be here, because I hadn't seen the movie yet. But Ken has a special place in tomorrow's announcements. And so these will already be passed by the time you hear them. But you may want to go back and check out our homepage of the WholeLife.church/live, and you can watch those announcements. They usually happen about 2 or 3 minutes into the
countdown.
Into the countdown. So just in case you just...
I'm a little scared because at this point I haven't seen this. I didn't even know whether my name was being taken in vain in this.
Well, that's part of the perks of getting to do the weekly announcements is, we get a chance to play and have a little fun. And so...
Just remember...
We're going to be hanging out next week, aren't we?
Yeah, we might be.
We might be. So, Dan...
The retreats are generally employees only? Is that that's the way it works? It's staff only? Okay. Tread lightly, boys. Tread lightly.
I knew I brought Dan for a reason today. He's going to be my attorney over here.
He's got it. So, Dan, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you. I'm great. It's great to be here for the unofficial 320. Maybe the number's closer to 340, but whatever it really is.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the one I'm supposed to be on.
Yeah, 320 weekly. And then the bonus, those get sprinkled in little bits here and there. So we don't really count those except just that they're a bonus.
They're
a bonus.
Yeah.
And we've done more bonuses, I think, since Ken has been here than we did in the previous 5 years of the podcast before that.
So many outtakes.
Well,
we had professionals before.
Yeah.
So we never turned on a chance to meet new people and try new things. And so because I actually haven't seen the movie, even though I've read up on it a little bit, I think I know what it's about, but I wanted to Ken, give us your synopsis of the movie in like if you were going to tell someone, why should you watch this movie? And it's like the elevator pitch. What would you tell them?
Because whether you're Christian or not Christian, it asks the important question of what's dividing us.
Stanley, same?
Yes. Hey, I just have to say that this is 2 weeks in a row for me on the podcast, which has never happened. I think it's my third appearance total on the church podcast, so I'm just happy to be here again.
Don't get used to it, Stanley.
Oh, no, dang it. All right, I can't go for the three-peat next week.
We'll see.
I wish I could reach the DVD because it has the log line on it, and I could just quote it verbatim. But
the gospel of love is dividing America. Yeah.
That is, I think that's what it is. So, in summary, I would say it's the film is important in that it's an opportunity for us to. It's a disarming look at ourselves, is why I think it's so enjoyable and why it's so good to watch, because you are kind of you feel like Dan's on your side, but then he sucker punches you in the film with quite a few elements of like, oh, Dan, why do you have to be so truthful in this moment? And so that's part of why I would say you need to see it, no matter who you are, what side of the aisle you feel like you sit on. I think it's an important film for people to see.
Dan? Were those fair?
Those were fair. That's a funny point, because I feel like in watching it tonight, and so I made the movie, and the crew and I, starting in 2006 and finished it in 2009, and it came out in theaters that fall and on DVD in spring 2010, and watching it tonight, I feel like I punched myself in the face almost as much as anyone on that, going, oh, yeah, right, I forgot about that part. But yeah, that's it. It's asking, it's challenging the us versus them paradigm, which unfortunately, since I made the movie, has
only
gotten worse and worse and worse and worse, and it's embarrassing, how bad it is now, I think, and just how how civil discourse has lost even the value. Like we can't even agree that we don't even agree that, if we could find civil discourse, that'd be a good thing. It's like, no, there's people that think there's no value to that.
Yeah.
And this is how civilizations collapse. This is historically speaking.
Sure.
This is what happens. And it's like, oh, wow. So it was a little painful how prescient lots of the movie was and just how much we traveled further down some of those roads of division.
You show a clip in there of Meacham, the historian.
Yeah.
He's based out of Nashville. I think he's at Vanderbilt. Maybe wrong about that. But anyway, you show a clip of him speaking. He talks about how if American, this is back in, 2006, 2007, when he does this speech. And he basically says if America keeps on the culture war the way it is, we are going to go to extremist places. And I was sitting behind you tonight when I watched it. And when I originally watched it, I was like, yeah, I agree with that. And then, 12 years later, I'm like, wow, that man's a prophet. Because it has as bad as it was in 2008 and 2009. It is ridiculously worse today.
Social media have just amplified it to the extreme.
That's a great point. Yeah,
because it's like the bumper stickers that you're wearing in the film are now memes. Because there's so many issues that are just like build up someone on the opposite end. And that's where I like that quote that was in the film. Let me look at it. Was when both sides think that they're losing, it's a recipe for extremism. Because
that was the Meacham quote.
Oh, that's the Meacham quote. Okay, because I was like, whoa, that one is exactly because both sides are saying they're over there doing this to us, and they're over there and they're saying something that's not true on the other side as well. And it's just both sides are just arguing with each other over things that the other side maybe doesn't even agree with.
Oh, it's true. It was interesting, too, to see that Jon Stewart, Tucker Carlson clip, from 2004. It was an old clip at the time, but it was like or maybe it was 2006, but it was such a good, from the old Crossfire show. I mean, Tucker Carlson on CNN at the time, right? And then Jon Stewart's like, what you're doing is not honest. It's just not honest. And here we are this many years later, 15, 16 years later. He's the biggest star on Fox, and he's still not honest. It's the same thing. It's like, well, this is how you push people's buttons. This is how you make money. This is how you do it. And he's still doing it.
Yeah,
and it's the same shtick. It's the same act.
Yeah.
Painful to watch.
And it's on, and I think that's the important thing. For me, one of the important things is it is a shtick for both sides.
Yeah.
Both sides of the argument. I mean, there are just some actors that are better than others at creating that division, but it's a shtick. It's something that you just think, do you really believe everything that's coming out of your mouth, or are you just trying to get eyeballs on the television and increase your ratings and do things like that?
And what's really interesting, and I would say this would be a fun survey for somebody to do. So who's the opposite of Carlson? Bill Maher, would you say? I mean, is he?
Well, I don't even know. Bill Maher is going.
Well, that's just it. That's just it.
He's gone more central.
I was just going to say, so you can measure the honesty based on, has your team ever done anything that you wish they wouldn't have, or you don't? And Bill Maher is ripping the left,
he's been
right, left,
killed.
and center. Oh, I know.
He's been getting killed. I mean, it used to be right and center would kill him. Now all three are just piling on top of him every time, and I'm like, man, I enjoy him more.
Oh, I know. Well,
this is great,
and it's because perhaps there's too much truth in it for people.
Yeah,
you know, and it's one thing to preach to the choir. That's an easy gig.
Yeah,
that's an easy gig, and the choir got kind of big.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a question. Everyone agreed there was a gut punch. How long has it been since you've actually sat alone or with someone else and actually watched the movie?
Oh, I was trying to remember, but it's probably been, probably 8 years, 10 years, something like that.
So watching it tonight, you did the screening here at WholeLife Church. And how many people did we have? Anyone do a head count?
Right around 100.
Right around 100 people.
Yeah.
So you're sitting in a room with 100 people. You haven't watched it in quite a few years. What was the biggest, like everyone talked about, what was the biggest gut punch for Dan watching your own film and knowing what everything that went in behind the scenes that nobody else knows, and what actually made, didn't fall on the cutting room floor, but made it to the actual film? What was the biggest gut punch?
Probably the confession booth at Portland Gay Pride, is still among the biggest gut punches. Tony Campolo also tells a story. We call it Roger's story. That's what he calls it, about a kid who was a gay fellow classmate at his 1950s West Philadelphia high school, who is ridiculed and tortured by fellow high school students, who takes his own life. And Tony confesses to I didn't stand up for him. You know, I wasn't a Christian because I wasn't friends with him. I didn't stand up for him. And those were always the biggest gut punches, and they still are.
They still are.
They still are. And then I think the other thing too that was interesting, and I felt better about it a little bit. It's like after I finished making Lord Save Us, I remember telling my wife, it's like, gosh, I think I might have to do a doc on racial reconciliation next. And I remember her saying, yeah, we can't afford that right now. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, let's hold off.
So I ended up going to the Sci-Fi Channel and killing zombies on Z Nation for 5 seasons. And it's like, okay, all right, now I can go back on some other stuff. But those elements of the show, when I guess it had to do with like Hurricane Katrina and the only racism stuff that we kind of covered in general, we covered the general issues, but just looking at that Katrina segment where there was a lot of, people would say judgment over, God sent the hurricane to smash that terrible, all those bad people down there.
Yeah.
It's like, you always hear that. And it's, oh, New Orleans, sinful New Orleans. And, somebody saying, well, the French Quarter, kind of known for, that's where the partying happens. That didn't get nailed.
They fared pretty well out of it.
Yeah, they did
else.
fine.
Yeah.
Everybody else, in Biloxi, what'd they do?
Yeah.
If it's sinful New Orleans is why God sent it, God's aim is crummy. What's that all about?
Yeah.
So those things were really fascinating. And I heard that this time as racism. I heard that this time as,
gotcha.
What are you guys saying? Because it's poor black people in Biloxi that got
mainly
nailed.
Of course.
And so what are you saying? What are you guys saying? Seriously, and I remember at the time going, oh, that's a dumb thing to say. That's bad. It's bad theology is probably where I mostly centered on it. Today, I went, you racist. That's where I went. I'm like, oh, so I feel like in that gut punch wasn't there before in the same way for me, which is my own issue.
So if you were going back and redoing that, would you add a little bit more of the racial element to it if you were redoing it? Because you said you kind of left some of that on the cutting room floor because, there's only so many directions you can focus a documentary, and I thought you had a very clear direction in it. But looking back now with the racial reckoning that's really kind of going on in this country, would that be something that you might spend a little more time on?
Probably, and I think I was a little more hopeful at the time because, Obama had just been elected.
Yeah.
And it felt like there was a lot of people that were, of all races, colors, and creeds that were excited about that and happy about that. And I took that as, oh, wow, we are making progress. This things are getting better. And instead it's like, whatever, they bit their lip for 8 years. And, the movie covers a lot of territory in 100 minutes. And that was, I think those are just things that, based on this cultural moment, I would have made the movie a little bit differently because,
Yeah, but it really makes sense because that was right there in 2008. Obama had just been reelected. And there was a lot of people who said, oh, look, racism is dead in the United States. Look, we have a black president. Clearly racism is
everything's
over with,
great.
And
everything's fine.
And, and it really isn't.
I'm afraid it's not. Yeah, well, and it's probably we wouldn't have had a certain president at 45 if not for a black president. It was like people had to go, we're going to suck it up. Turns out people aren't progressing. We're just going to be quiet until someone gives us permission to go back to our worst instincts. And that's sort of what happened, I would argue.
I was going to say the one part of the film that I felt like, man, it would have sounded really different today was the whole battle cry perspective of the pastor. I'm trying to describe how it would be so different, but I feel like he was much more sure of his position of or the phrase of, I'm going to love them, but I don't like their lifestyle is almost something you don't hear anymore.
Yeah, right.
Because it's just still
a
not
nice,
loving the person.
It's still a nice way of saying, yeah, I don't love you and I'm not going to try. Yeah.
And that was one thing that like, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. No one would say it this way anymore. I don't think on camera.
Well, and I don't think even though I don't feel like he was being particularly genuine in the moment to say, we went to San Francisco and we were super surprised to find people were offended that we stood on the city hall steps and said, we just love you. Jesus loves you. And it's like to not understand they were doing political theater and to feign that they didn't know. What? San Francisco? What?
You're going to be upset.
Like was absurd.
It was like while I was watching it too, I was like, is he the bad guy in this story?
Well, and that's funny because it's funny. I watched that too because I remember, I just interviewed him. That's one of the things that we tried really hard to do with this movie was to not tell you what to think. I mean, it's like you can go, that confession booth was a stupid idea. You shouldn't have done that because here's what God says. Well, you work that out with God, I guess, yourself. Or you shouldn't have done this or you shouldn't have done that. And then, so in that case, it would have been really easy to just turn the camera on and go, here's why you're a bad guy. And I didn't. I just, tell me why you did that. And he tells me, and I'm like, you're either lying to me or you're too dumb to be leading people. One or the other. Pick which one it is. Yeah. Neither is a fine choice. But it was fascinating, and I don't know. That was a fascinating thing. So but you're right. That segment. That segment. People, we've moved past that because I don't think somebody could today go, oh, I didn't understand San Francisco was the most liberal place in America.
Right. And then like, I was thinking back to when I had watched it. I wasn't thinking these Christians are crazy or they're bad or they're actually being bigoted. Because his responses, like on paper, you'd be like, oh, okay, he's being pretty, like open. Like, of course, they can be there too to protest us. But then watching it today, I was like, man, what? So just disingenuous the whole time.
I remember asking him, and I don't remember why it's not in the movie now. It might have just been an editing thing, or maybe it was even after the camera turned off. But I remember asking him, I just have a question. So you're to San Francisco, thousands of kids come from, I think, all over the state, but they could have been come from all over the West. Why didn't you go to the Tenderloin and feed the homeless if you wanted to show the love of Jesus? Why did you feel like you had to go to the city hall steps and put on a show? Why didn't you do this or this or this? So here's some things that Jesus did. Why not imitate those things? Because Jesus didn't go around. I mean, it's like the Al Franken jokes in the show. Hey, I'm Jesus. I did that. That blind guy, he's not blind anymore. That was me. It's like that. That's kind of how we do Christianity,
Yeah.
And so that was a thing where, and I think his answer was, and it probably was after the camera turned off, but it was like, oh yeah, we could have done that. That would have been a good idea. Maybe we'll do that another time.
Well, I think all the answer to the question is in the name. I mean,
yeah, it's called battle.
It's called battle cry.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think exactly.
Yeah,
I mean when you and that's a line in my sermon that I'll be giving is but when you wage war, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, war is about carnage. It's not about lifting people up. And when you start using those kind of terms, it's a battle, it's a fight, it's blah, blah, blah. Well, what do you think? What comes out of battles and what comes out of fights? A lot of hurt, maimed, and hurt people.
Yeah.
And I think Christianity would do well to think a little bit less of this being a war with other human beings, and more of loving other human beings, making it, and caring about others. And is there a war going on in the world? Yeah, there is. But is it a war that's going to be won by us pummeling the other side? Or is it a war that's going to be won by loving the other side? It stands to reason that Christ was nailed to a cross, and that was the win.
Yeah.
That was the win, and it kind of a lot bothers me when as Christians you hear this. Well, we can't be stepped on, and our rights can't be taken away from us. And
what was it? What's that thing
Bible
about the cheek again?
Yeah,
what was that again? How's that go?
I don't remember that part.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah,
What?
me either.
How many rights were taken from Christ while he was dragged to the cross?
Yeah, and that little part of my kingdom is not of this earth.
Yep.
That little part there that that seems
Quit
to be,
making it complicated, Ken.
seems to be somewhat evasive to us that because we're so busy building kingdoms here, and some of them are political. And if we're honest, if we all look in our lives, we'll see that we're building our own kingdoms.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Amen.
so it's easy to look at the people that annoy us that are building kingdoms. But we all could do with a little bit of introspection about even I think about like the feeding the homeless thing and taking care and doing the things that Jesus did. How much of it is good PR for my church, and how much of it is because I really think that's what Jesus would be doing,
Right?
And that's really my mission as opposed to getting attention. And
Ken's making this uncomfortable.
I know. Well, that's what I hope the movie is, and I think it is that it's a mirror.
Yeah.
The movie's a mirror,
Yeah.
and kind of wherever you are, you get to look. And some people don't like looking in a mirror, right? Some people go, no, I'm not gonna. And then other people, and then you'll see different issues. We'll see the things that we're struggling with or where we fail.
I hate looking in the mirror, but yet I know I need it. And actually, when it happens, it's not as bad as I thought. And only for the reason that I'll be super transparent here. I had a couple weeks ago, we had Jordan Soliday on, and him and I met for coffee downtown. And if you know anything about downtown Orlando, it's nearly impossible to find a place to park. Certainly not to find a place to park for free. I ended up, we were at Crafton Common down off of 50 and Orange Avenue. I was already late, and he was late, but I was later than him. And I'm circling the block looking for a place to park, and I find a place, and it's hot. Cars don't have any AC. I get out. I'm trying to figure out the stupid meter, and this guy comes up, and he's pretty well dressed, and he's like, "Hey, could you buy me a meal?" And I was like, "No, I got no time." I'm like, "I'm late. I got to go. No, can't do it." And his head dropped. And he turned around and he walked back to his stuff. And Randy didn't even faze him. I'm here fighting with my app. I'm said a couple words that probably shouldn't be repeated. And I'm sweating and I'm mad. And literally, as soon as I got the text message that my parking meter had been fed until 1:31 p.m., and I had a moment to kind of garner my thoughts, I was like, Holy Spirit was like, hey, fool, remember what you prayed for this morning? God put somebody in my path that needs me today. Remember that one? Do you? Well, guess what you just did?
I sent him to you.
I sent him to you,
just like you asked me to.
I served it with an easy volley. All you had to do was just hit it over the net. And so I was like, I walked over and I was just like, swallow hard. And I'm like, look, I'm sorry I was a jerk. I'm late and there's no excuse. I can't buy you a meal, but I am heading to an appointment. I'm like, if a cup of coffee and a breakfast sandwich, whatever they have to eat is okay, follow me. And so got to know him. His name was Kareem. He was just living on the street for 3 days because lost his job as an over-the-road truck driver because he wasn't getting paid. And he's like, I can't keep, and he's like, my truck is where I live. So I don't have a place to stay. And he didn't look homeless. He didn't look, dirty or disheveled or anything like that. And he's like, but I'm hungry. I could really use a meal. And so, I got there and just told Jordan, just hang out for a second. I got a new friend, Kareem, here. We got to take care of him. And, he ordered the house. And I said, that's good. Order whatever you want because I'm feeling guilty. And that's probably going to help me just a little bit for ignoring you. And prayed with him. And, man, what a blessing in the midst of a really crappy week, all the way around, everything
Right.
else. And that was honestly the best thing that happened to me all week.
Yeah.
And so the mirror, we can never just say like, well, just because it's hard, we shouldn't do it, or the reflection that we see, because it was pretty ugly. It was a glass storefront I could see, and it wasn't real pretty as to what we had to look at. But you kind of mentioned that things that happened maybe after the camera was off, or maybe something that, I'm not really sure. Maybe that just hit the cutting room floor. Maybe it, decided it wasn't. Was there anything that you can remember from that time that like maybe didn't make the movie, or a story or something that just kind of almost encapsulates the process and like where you were at that time? Because I think it's, as we grow, we find ourselves like, you wouldn't make the same film today just because you're a different person.
That's true.
And if there was something about that time, those are always the things that like pique my interest. Like, well, I know what he made for the movie, but what? Anything else interesting that went on? Then?
Well, the story I told at the screening tonight, and the first thing that came to mind in that kind of thing, somebody else asked something similar, was we had a civil rights activist, and I guess he's a preacher and author, and a guy named John Perkins from Jackson, Mississippi. And he tells the story of a garbage strike, I want to say 67 or 68 in Jackson, where he, leads the march and gets beat and taken to jail and gets pummeled by the cops. And him telling a very almost supernatural story of severely being hurt in jail and having to pray his way out of being consumed by hate for the men who were in the process of beating him. And the way he told the story, being a sci-fi fan and all that, it was almost like this creeping evil that it's like, it's okay. You can hate them. Sure. Look at this terrible thing they're doing. You can hate them. That's fine. And just to keep praying to keep that hate from enveloping him. That was he tells that story, and again, I don't remember why it's not in or how it's not in, but in the context of today, that would be in the movie today.
So you met John Perkins?
Yeah.
Oh, Love is the Final Fight.
Yeah.
John Perkins. I mean, if anyone, if you're Switch, I'm a huge Switchfoot fan, and one of their songs, "Love Is a Final Fight," is all about John Perkins.
Oh, really?
And so they go into great detail in multiple different venues that I've seen them at about John Perkins, and they've told that story and others. And that's powerful.
No, we spent a whole afternoon with him, and there's probably 2 hours of footage, and I should go find that footage because he's in the movie. He's got 6 or 8 or 10 quotes in the movie or something, so he's got a nice presence in the film. But considering all the stuff we talked about, and some really powerful stuff, like talking about the pro-life movement that he supports, but his line is something to the effect of, I just wish that the pro-life movement cared about the life after it entered this world.
Yeah.
And because we don't.
No.
Yeah.
There's a ton on both
Perkins has got a lot.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Now I have to watch the movie. And actually, the name of the song is "This Is the Sound" by Switchfoot. Look it up. It's
This
really
is
great
the sound.
too.
Okay, excellent.
It's an
Thank you.
excellent song, but
Maybe you can link it in the podcast notes, huh?
I will.
Should do that.
That's just powerful, because knowing that someone like he has this rich tapestry of a life, and all of it in like this is the final fight is love. And when that's what I think that's maybe what we're talking about as far as all of this is the final fight, because the only thing that can cure any of these things, the fear that causes us to be like, ooh, I don't know about that person. Ooh, I don't know. And, all these things that we're so afraid of, even as Christians, which is ridiculous when you think about it, but it's really the fear that drives it. And love, perfect love, is the only thing that drives out fear coming from Christ. And that's awesome.
It seems like Jesus explained all this.
It seems like
it seems like they wrote it down.
I think I've read it at least
once.
But
I mean, I was always amused by things like the at the Last Supper, the last thing he says, pretty much after Judas leaves, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, my paraphrase, okay, listen, knuckleheads, listen up. I'm gonna have to go soon, but here's the filter that I want you to take everything and run it through. Love one another. Okay, everybody got that? Repeat it after me. Love one another. Okay, Jesus, we got it.
Like, where are you going?
Yeah. Wait, we can't go with you? What? And it's like, so that's the filter. And it's like Jesus was explaining a different kind. We're all hung up on being right. It's like, to love is right. It's a different kind of being right. It's the highest type of being right.
And just to add on to that, Dan, I just have to say that it's significant what else Jesus says. He says, love one another as I have loved you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think what's so significant about that is he's saying this after washing all the disciples' feet, even the one that was going to betray him. I mean, can you imagine if Jesus lived the kind of Christian life that a lot of us? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I'm calling you out.
Oh,
the
scene, the Last Supper would play like the Untouchables, where De Niro as Capone is walking around the table with the baseball bat, and Judas gets it in the back of the head. And then Jesus sets everybody straight.
Yeah, and
let that be a lesson.
Guys quit arguing about who's best. I'm the best, and I mean, yeah, just imagine that. And that's to me, I think, the thing that I have to remind myself about from when I'm driving on the highway on I-4 to when I'm at home with my wife and my children, the true you, the one that's not in public. And it's a great and easy thing for me to pick on certain political figures, certain celebrity figures, and whatever. But it's a much more daunting task to look in the mirror in the morning and be honest about who I really am and who I really want to be, and what it really means to love each person that comes through my day, including the ones that are on the television that drive me nuts, including the ones that I disagree with politically, including the ones that I disagree theologically, include all those people, but to love them like Jesus loved them. Like I said, very easy for me to go ahead and point fingers, very hard to look in the mirror and go, yeah, Ken, you're pretty rough on some people that you think it's fair to be rough on because they're mean and nasty people, but you're pretty rough on them. Do you really love them? Do you really care about them? I mean, and if I'm honest, there's people that I know the truth. If I saw that that they were in deep trouble, I would be happy about it, because I'm like, yes, this is the Lord helping you find the truth of the nastiness that you've done to others, and yes, here we go. And yet I have to tell myself that's not loving them the way that Jesus loved them and loves them. So I think that's the difficulty, of it all, is that it's really easy to see the hatefulness in others, and it's a lot harder to just be truthful about the hatefulness that's inside of me.
So, Dan, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Where do we find the DMP, the Dan Merchant Paraphrase Bible? Where do we find it? Because the KWP happens a lot around here, and I think that, I'm just guessing now, but this is probably going to take 20. He may have to surpass Andy before we have the whole Bible done in KWP. But that DMP was straight up. That was right on. So
I love it. I love it. Right on.
Because as soon as you said, you had me at Knuckleheads. That's really what you had me at. So.
I've got the PG and the R versions of that too, by the way, depending on what the audience needs. Sometimes you need to hear it harsher. I wrote a Lord Save Us book that Thomas Nelson put out, and we put a comic in. I wrote a comic book that's in there, and I want to say, I can't remember even exactly what it is, but it's kind of like it's the Beatitudes, but done American style.
Is that something we can still get our hands on, like Amazon or something?
Probably.
If somebody were listening to this, like in the next 10 minutes, they could plan on showing up to church on Saturday here at WholeLife, and we have some of those books that Dan scavenged from somewhere. But we do, I don't know, we'll see whether there are any books left by the time Saturday's over or not, but you could find those. And DVDs, I don't know, if you write to Dan, he can probably...
I got some in the garage. That's the answer to that. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No,
exactly.
I'll tell you what I did. I actually, I purchased Lord Save Us from, I think I got it on Amazon.
On Amazon
Prime, I think I purchased it from them.
Well, I'm going to have to do it because, again, I looked it up just because I was like, it got down to Friday, and I really didn't think these really cool announcements were going to take me that long, but I did them in After Effects. And
you're building a lot of hype, Randy, for the announcements. I'm excited.
I knew it was going to take Randy this long. I saw him downloading the After Effects template, and I'm like, it's going to be a long night.
Stanley knows my skill level with After Effects, and it's very meager. Yeah. And so it did take longer, but so.
But hey, let's talk a little bit about Dan's most recent
That's
projects.
Coming up tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we're doing that tomorrow at 3. And tomorrow, for those of you who are listening, I guess is like
will that be
in the past.
Do you know?
Time traveling.
No, because these are Pure Flicks videos. We are not going to be able to live stream that.
That's right. So that will not be something. If you're not here, well, you're not going to be able to be here if you didn't know about it before this.
Yeah, but we're going to tell you how to do that, though.
Oh, okay.
But we will tell you how to do that, because you can still watch it. You're just not going to get to watch it with Dan. That's all.
Well, this might be the most important episode we have ever put out in all 320, where the show notes are going to be your absolute best friend and your ticket to everything, Dan.
Yeah, we
so make sure you swipe up, because everything will be there.
so Dan's put out 2 new projects on PureFlix, and if you've been like me and been like, oh, PureFlix,
You didn't know about PureFlix?
I knew about PureFlix, and I was like, PureFlix has been upping their game in the last year or so. They got The Chosen on there, which I love.
That's
As
a
you
good
guys know,
show.
I love that.
Yep.
And Dan, they went to Dan. They have had Dan produce 2 really amazing shows. One is called Local and Live, which is about a Christian radio station, and
Actually, live and local.
sorry, I got it backwards there. So I will not be promoting very much anymore for Dan. So anyway, and then the other one is Going Home. Did I get that one right?
You did.
I got that one right.
That's correct.
So tell us about that, Dan.
So Going Home is a drama about a hospice nurse named Charlie Copeland, played by Cynthia Geary, who you may remember from CBS's hit show Northern Exposure back in the day. So
love Northern Exposure.
Yeah, so she's a wonderful, wonderful actress who really just delivers. I mean, it was so exciting to work with her. She was wonderful. And Cozy Zulsdorf plays a character named Janie, who is the young protege it's her first day at the hospice, and so she's done nursing school and thinks that hospice care is where she wants to be, and gets in, with all this bubbly energy and this enthusiasm of a,
Hospice,
okay. She's dedicated and excited, and then realizes, oh wow, this is hard.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is hard. And then the first episode features former NFL All-Pro Vernon Davis, and a terrific actor who coincidentally played Moesha's dad back in the 90s. William Allen Young is his name.
What was the what show was that?
Moesha, which is on CW or whatever it used to be.
Wasn't that the name of the show?
Yes, Moesha's the name of the show.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Were they twins?
Sister was the one with twins.
The twins.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, I know who Vernon Davis is. The NFL was my ticket in.
Yeah, there you go. All right, very good.
And Vernon Davis is really amazing in that episode.
Yeah, he's so good. Yeah, he's terrific. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff. It was neat to talk with him because when he was playing with the 49ers, he was doing improv classes at night. So it's like football star by day, improv comedy genius by night. But a terrific guy, great energy, and a good actor. He's really developed into an excellent actor and was able to do a lot.
Did he add a little bit into that character at all with his experience in the NFL? Because not to give away too much, but the character is a former NFL player.
Yeah, he was. He was playing somebody kind of close to himself. It was funny because there's a weird little serendipity. His name came up, and I knew who he was, and had seen him, doing guest spots on, NFL Today or whatever through the years. But I thought, well, can he act? He's charismatic, and he's handsome, and he's got a big smile, and he's got a great voice, all these things. But can he act? I don't know. And we were talking to his agent, and his agent said, oh, well, he's in Mississippi right now, shooting a movie with Morgan Freeman. And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I'm like, wait, in Mississippi? Because my first assistant director, Buddy Jared, is shooting a movie in Mississippi with Morgan Freeman. And I'm like, wait, what? So I called Jared up and I go, hey, is Vernon Davis on your movie? Yeah. And I go, well, what's the story? And he goes, oh, he is dedicated. He is hardcore. He is really into it. And I go, well, that's fantastic. We're talking about getting him for Going Home. And I go, well, what do you think? And he goes, well, he's playing a Zulu priest serial killer in this. So it's a bit of but he's very good. He's very convincing. So, and I go, well, he'd only have to play a version of himself, as a former pro athlete or whatever. So, but he brought it. He brought it, and he didn't really have to add anything to the script. It was all there. We sort of had it figured out, but he made it seem real just by showing up at 6'5" and 230. It's like, okay, I'll believe that you were a football player.
Presence.
Oh, absolutely. So that was great. So that's the first episode. We have Tom Skerritt is in the second episode, and he's fantastic, and that was really a thrill to work with him.
He's still kicking it, huh?
He is at 89.
I was going to say, he's got to be almost 90. I mean, he was in Top Gun 30-some years ago, and he wasn't the spring chicken then.
No, exactly. No, he's always the grizzled, 50-something guy back then. Exactly. So Skerritt is tremendous. Anybody that knows the Z Nation show that I did for 5 years, In the third episode, the guy who played Doc, a guy named Russell Hodgkinson, guest stars on Going Home. So that's one for the sci-fi fans. I don't know where the PureFlix Sci-Fi Channel Venn diagram overlaps or not, but for
at
those
Going Home,
yeah, for those 8 people, it'll be right there.
Yeah.
And then we have a wonderful actor named Conchetta Tomei, who has been in our television sets for 40 years. And you look at her resume, it's like, one episode of this, one episode of that, one episode of that. China Beach, 80 episodes, one episode, boom. Then the next, 10 years later and on another series. But just amazing professionals, amazing thespians who, when you give them a death scene, you give them heavy drama to do. It was just really neat to see Cynthia Geary work, especially with Scarrett and Conchetta Tomei, and then one of my personal favorites, and she has a big arc through 4 of the 6 episodes. Is a wonderful actress named Charisma Carpenter from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. So she's been again in our TVs, for 30 years, 25 years, something like that. And so she plays the lead character's kind of estranged best friend from college, and turns out she's got cancer and has ended treatments and is going to be leaving the world soon. And so it's a place to take the season where it gets personal for Charlie. She's used to walking people home, but complete strangers. And so it adds this other interesting development when it's somebody that she's, known and loved. And then kind of like as a stand-in for most of us, broken relationships through our lives. And what if we had that deathbed perspective now? How would we change? What decisions would we make? Would we make that call to our brother who we won't talk to because it's his fault and that's it and he deserves it?
Yeah.
And it's like, or I could call him and say I'm sorry and we could figure it out and then I got 20 more years with him, that kind of thing.
So these are episodic in nature, both, right?
Yeah, both are 6-episode season 1 of each. Yeah,
all in the can already.
Oh yeah, they're on the air. All 6 episodes of Going Home are available as of whatever we are now, middle of July.
Number one show on PureFlix, right?
Yeah, it's the number one show on
Nice.
PureFlix. Yeah, so that's neat to be, to have a show that it's it's a very faith forward show, and it's very direct, and it's not, I don't know, it's not schmaltzy, it's not
really preachy. It's
I was going to ask if
it's
schmaltzy was
thoughtful.
another word for preachy.
that it's not, but it's not schmaltzy or preachy.
What's schmaltzy?
Schmaltzy.
Schmaltzy.
Lowest common denominator storytelling.
Okay, I like the word. I'm just I want to use it correctly next time. I drop it on someone and be like, I got it from Dan.
There you go.
There.
That's how I would define it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I watched the first episode of it, and I'm looking forward to watching some more. And it's a thought provoker because if I'm guessing that probably most of the people who are listening to this podcast, you have not been around too many people who are on their deathbed, and unfortunately, I've been around a few through the years as a pastor, and for me, watching that first episode, it was intense because it was so realistic. Just even the breathing patterns that there were some little details in there that the coloration, there's just a lot going on there. And I know this sounds like maybe a little heavy, but it's a topic that I think that we steer away from, and it's not good that we steer away from it, because as hospice talks about, there's and Dan brings out really well in the show, there is such a thing as a good death. There's, we tend to think of birth as being a good birth, and, being born is a good thing. Well, there's a way to die well too. And the show really kind of hits on that. There's a line in the first episode where one of the characters doesn't want to let go of the person who's on their way towards death. And Cynthia's character, Charlie, just has a beautiful thing that she says to him about. He says, "Well, is it wrong for me to want my son to be healed?" And she said, "No, but you can wish for more.
Yeah,
you can get more." And I thought, it really rang true with me. So I hope people will take a chance and watch that. We're this weekend, I know it's past, but we're teaming up with Dan to promote people getting PureFlix. I mean, if you're spending $10 or $12 a month on Netflix, another $6 or $8 a month on PureFlix is probably a good investment too.
Make it an even 20.
Yeah.
That's what I
said.
said.
An even 20, whatever it
10.
is.
Yeah.
10
And, so anyway, so we're doing some things to promote that right now, and check those shows out on PureFlix. They're really, I'm looking forward to seeing the radio one. Having worked
Has
in
that
radio,
dropped yet, too?
I'm looking forward to that.
With the first 3 episodes are now up, and that one stars Dave Coulier from Full House as a radio veteran in a really small market at a morning Christian radio show. The station's called K-Hug, FM 109, K-Hug.
K-Hug,
Always
all right.
live and local. Totally inoffensive to everyone. Always K-Hug.
In Orlando, we have Z88.3, safe for the little ears in the back seat.
Well, it's close.
There
Yeah,
you
it's
go.
pretty close. There you go. Exactly. So Dave Coulier's in that. And one of the fun things we do, it plays like a real morning radio show. So part of the show is on the air, and you've got kind of fixed cameras that might, the way ESPN or Howard Stern or some other radio on TV type show you may have seen looks. And then when it goes to commercial break or when they play a song, then it flips to sort of an office style mockumentary behind the scenes, handheld camera, and it's here's what happens behind the scenes, but when they're off
Nice.
the air and on the air. And then the third element that's kind of fun, it's fake show, real guests. So we have, Christian singer Colton Dixon is on the show that just premiered this week. Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen, is
wow.
going to be on
Dallas.
coming
Nice.
up.
Playing themselves.
Playing themselves. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just interviewed by our fake hosts. We had, going back, you guys will know, John Cooper from Skillet was great. He was on. He's a madman. He was hilarious, very funny. Really a good guy. I'm trying to think of who else we had.
So do you script those, or do you
No,
do
they're
they
just interviews.
freestyle?
No, we do that. We do it just like you really do it. In fact, my wife Kara was the segment producer, so she would go through and do all the research and drop the cards. Hear the 4 questions for the hosts, and we throw them in, and that was interesting because so Dave Coulier, Full House, Fuller House, actor, stand-up comic, very funny guy. His co-host is played by Emily Pendergrast, who was on Veep. If you guys have seen HBO's Veep, she was on that for a couple seasons and very funny. And she's a Groundlings main cast member, the LA improv group, right? So they're both used to being loose and on their feet. And then what was really fascinating was to throw them in with actual people to interview. Yeah. And it's like, well, because they're not going to play along any more than what's on your car. So that was an interesting thing for them. That was a pretty hard thing for them, but it also made it feel very authentic that they were a local morning radio show. And so that was really neat. So that's a fun dynamic to the show. Leanne Morgan was the other comedian. If you guys know her, that she was on. And
can a radio show not be funny? WKRP.
Yeah.
Right. And who's the Phil Hartman? What was that? Was one of my
News Radio.
News Radio.
One of my favorite TV shows ever.
Yeah.
It has to be funny.
Yeah, it's funny. This one's I like it. It's kind of a sweet show because it's about one of the fun elements is the new program director comes in. Inevitably, the what strikes fear into the heart of every morning host is, no, there's a new program director. We're all dead. We're all fired. This is all, so you see the insecurities and the weaknesses of this guy who's been number one in the market for 30 years, but now there's a new guy in town and there's a new PD in town.
Number one in the small market, right?
Yeah, number one in the small market, number one in the Tri-County area.
Only one in the small market.
Yeah,
Only
no,
one
just
in the-
about right. Yeah. That's just about right. Yeah, there is almost nobody live and local anymore. Exactly right. So that's fun. And then so this new program director sort of takes a shine to the co-host who 9 years earlier was an intern who just got promoted in, and she hung on and did well enough. And now she's kind of like, all right, this mentor gave me my start, but let's get on with it already. Quit phoning it in, kind of a thing. And so it's so you get all the conflicts, and I did a year of morning radio, so I've been inside of it before, and there's a lot that we pulled from, just the dynamic of it. So it's kind of I think it's a kind of a sleeper. It's kind of a gentle show, and it's ultimately very sweet because it's about people and how do you take care of each other. And
I just want to know, do you have a drive, like a traffic person on there?
Of course.
Excellent.
Traffic and weather on the 10s, Ken.
You didn't call Ken for that role?
Exactly.
Well, no, I'll tell you, actually, out of all the things I ever did in radio, that was like, they put me in one of the traffic cars for one day. They never had me
again?
do that again. It's
that's
awful, man. You're trying to drive and think at the same time. It's the worst.
Chopper Ken?
Oh,
You weren't
man.
in a helicopter?
Oh.
I thought they were always in a helicopter. No.
Not on Guam. That was the hilarious thing, doing traffic on Guam. It's 30 by 5. It's like that's because I actually did Christian radio on Guam, and that was my big joke, because I had no idea what I was doing. I was brand new, and we just had no listeners to speak of. It didn't feel like when we first started, because we didn't do anything live. And so I started doing a live morning drive or show, and so I got this kid who was driving across the island to go to school to call in when he got to school with his news with his drive.
What did you see on your drive?
We called it, his last name was Mahoney. We called it Moving Mahoney, and it was like,
oh man,
it was like one of my favorite stupid segments. I like look back and I'm like, oh my word, I can't believe how. No wonder we got so much hate mail.
That's how you know you're doing something right.
That's
sometimes.
That's it. Well, hey, as we start to wrap it up, I think, if that description of the last two shows wasn't enough to motivate you, you're not sitting across from Dan. He's motivating me. I'm going to go home and I'm going to do it.
Nice.
And so anything we're doing that's pertaining to this weekend will be in the show notes. And if for some reason you have any problem connecting one way or the other, we'll give you a link to Dan's stuff online. Any social media, whatever you people can find you. And if you have any trouble, you can reach us at 407-965-1607, voicemail or text, and podcast at WholeLife.Church. Anything you want to add, Dan?
I'd only add that Sony Pictures bought PureFlix.
Oh, okay.
And so as part of that, there's a certain part of the Faith and Family catalog of Sony picture stuff that's now available on there. So, Helen Mirren and the Queen, or Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, things like that. The Chosen now. They're doing a lot of original programming. I'm working with Rich Peluso at Affirm Originals, Sony Affirm Originals, who made, great movies like, Soul Surfer or Heaven is for Real. Some of the projects they did.
I recognize some of those.
Yeah, they're excellent films, and not schmaltzy.
Not
There,
schmaltzy.
see?
There
Work
you go.
that in again.
Oh.
There you go.
And so it's neat. So it's a much broader library. And then they're green lighting projects like Going Home and Live and Local, and they've got lots of new stuff coming. So if you think you know what it is, maybe come back and take a look at PureFlix. And I think it's it's evolving, and there's always new stuff on there. And The Chosen is a wonderfully made
That's reason
show.
enough alone.
It was funny. I'd been hearing about it, and then it showed up on PureFlix. I'm like, oh great, I finally get to watch this. And what was interesting was like, oh, it's Blue Bloods, except for it's done. It's
Old
storytelling.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's old. Yeah, it's exactly. It's first century Palestine, but it's the storytelling format was terrific and so tight. And
Feels like TV.
Just the way we're used to watching those kind of stories, like almost a procedural, almost,
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Dallas and his team they spent the money, they raised the money, they spent the money on it. It's terrific storytelling, and storytelling in a modern format, ancient stories, but in a modern format. And I just thought that was it's so simple. It was like genius.
Without feeling modern. Like, it doesn't feel like it's, New Age Jesus or something with,
Exactly.
but it feels authentic.
Highly researched feeling.
But I think that's probably yeah.
I was going to say, there'll be episodes where I'll be like, well, this episode isn't so good. But every episode, I get goosebumps at least once whenever I watch that show. I'll be like, oh, this episode, whatever. And then it'll be like, oh, this is actually how he did Water to Wine. And it was so-and-so that was actually there. And it was like this huge meaningful moment. And I'm like, whoosh.
Oh, I know. I think it's really fun. So I'm proud that Going Home and Live and Local get to sit next to the Chosen and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
And I'll just brag on you a little bit, right? I think I think Going Home is actually doing even better than Chosen on PureFlix.
Well, we were number one. Yeah, we were number one.
So,
we were new. We were new too.
Well, but let's not focus on that, right?
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right.
We're taking that number one and running with it.
Well, what was lovely and really touching about what people said who watched it about watched Going Home, it was really coming out of the pandemic. People that know nurses and know doctors and know first responders and know people who who this is their calling, what they do. Like they thought, they appreciated that it was done with authenticity and tenderness, and that the show, while it could be considered, some people like, oh, hospice, I don't know, depressed. It's like people say that it's beautiful. People say that it's cathartic, and somebody says, oh yeah, you'll like. There's a Facebook post. Somebody says something to the effect of, oh yeah, no, you'll. I watch with tissues. You'll need your tissues, but they're good tears. They're good tears,
yeah,
and I'm
true.
like, oh, what a good tears, like a good death, good tears.
Yep.
So anyway, so thank you, Ken. I appreciate it, and I'm excited about.
I wanted to ask two questions.
go
I
for
know
it.
that I don't know. You can make a bonus episode out of it if you want, but
All right, so Ken has called an audible, and we are going to go into extra time, but we're going to do it in the form of a bonus. And we already talked about, like, we've already done more bonuses. We're adding another one. So
I'm all about the bonus, Randy.
you
all
are.
about the bonus.
And even though, and here's a little trick of the trade, we've already done the bonus. We know we're going to talk about.
Randy, don't tell him that.
Oh, right. Oh, no. Yeah, well, see, there we gave away a secret. So we're going to find out how Dan met Ken. We're going to find out about what it's like behind the scenes on a set, and we're going to find out some really cool stuff about how being a Christian in Hollywood maybe isn't as bad as you think it is. It might even be better. So there's lots to look forward to in the bonus episode, so stay tuned for that. That will be in your feed on a Friday evening about 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's going to do it for episode 320. Dan, thank you for joining us. Ken, you want to bring us out?
Yeah, I just say thanks again to Dan for being here. He certainly didn't have to do it, and just always appreciate somebody that you can call up and say, "Hey, would you do me a favor?" And they say, "Okay, we can do that." So just thanks to you, and thanks Randy and Stanley. This is a late night. It's I'm looking at my clock. It's about 10:30 on Friday evening here, and you guys go the extra mile too. So I just want to say a huge thanks to you guys.
This is maybe
My
one
pleasure.
This is
My
one of the funnest episodes we've done in a while. So Dan, thank
fun.
you. I enjoyed getting a chance to meet you on the podcast. Is there a better way to do it?
I don't know if there is.
I
This
don't
is
either.
a pretty great way.
At least
We
not for
should
me.
go on the street and just start meeting people. Me like, take a seat. Let's learn about you. I don't know.
We'll go, couch on the street. Couch
I
on
think
the
it's-
street.
I think it's the headphones.
Maybe it's
It
the
must
the
be
headphones. It
headphones.
just creates this instant intimacy because it's like,
You're so close to
yeah,
my
right,
ears.
exactly. See, right?
It's right there.
magic. The magic of radio. It's not dead yet. It's just they just call it podcast now.
That's it.
And when Randy whispers, you can hear me
A little too well.
All right, guys. Thanks as always for listening. Send in any questions or any comments, anything you have to say. And if it's really important, we'll hit Dan up with it. But otherwise, Ken and I will be back next week, and
we'll
we'll
handle
answer
it.
it. We'll take
Or
care
we'll
of
make
it.
up an
And
answer
maybe
for
Stanley
him.
too.
And maybe, hey,
No, just kidding.
he got 3, and now he wants 4.
boy,
See?
No,
He just
I'm in the
keeps
bonus.
asking
I'm
for
in the bonus.
more
I
and
made the
more.
third one.
Hat trick, Palmunowski.
Actually, I've never seen next week, so I'm out. And there's no way I can talk about it.
Well, I haven't seen one of them yet before we've actually done it, so I can't watch next week. I'm going to have to go in blind again.
All right.
All right, that's it for this week, guys. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.